So hi, everyone. Like Gretchen said, my name is Sarah Truby, and I'm one of the co-hosts of this series. I am super excited to, this combo of talks has actually been really thoughtfully, I think they're going to complement each other really well. Andy gave a really thoughtful overview of many of the issues around communication, and Alan, our next speaker, Alan Padgett, is going to cover a lot of the details about managing a cave rescue. So by way of introduction, Alan Padgett is a life member of the National Speleological Society, where he has also become an NSS Fellow and has received an NSS Merit Award. He has been caving in the Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, or TAG area for more than 50 years. He is a captain of the Walker County, Georgia Fire Rescue and Caving Cliff teams. Alan retired from the Georgia Department of Natural Resources, joking that Ellison's cave, which has the deepest pit in the US, for those of you that don't know of it, was his office. Alan is a co-author of the book On Rope, and he is currently a public safety agency trainer for management of lost and missing persons incidents. Alan attended the second ever National Cave Rescue Commission seminar, and he has been an instructor for the National Cave Rescue Commission for almost 40 years. Alan currently resides near Lafayette, Georgia with his wife, Karen, who's also an NSS member, and still goes caving in the heart of TAG. His passions in caving are cartography and exploration. He says that he does cave rescue so that others might live. So everyone, please welcome Alan.
Is cave rescue management when they get big? Or just when everything was really boring, let me play you the song of my people. If you're into emergency services, you know what that means. This is me in a big picture still. Please, if you could, hold your questions to the end, as I'll have plenty of time to answer those when we get to the end. Just write them down, or if you can chat them and Sarah can hang on to them, that'll work. I'm going to tell you a story, so hang on, get ready, and here we go. It's an early spring evening. You just sat down for supper. The pager sets the tones and a text message from dispatch arrives. Blowing Cave, a 9-year-old male has a broken lower leg. Respond cave rescue. So the 911 call has been made. Blowing Cave is a popular tourist cave, mostly easy walk-in. It has one, hands and knee crawl, but carry out is easy, no technical rigging required. Our rescue team goes here fairly often, no big deal. Go in, pick them up, put them in a litter, get them out, not a problem. The cave is 4 miles outside of town on a state forest, and the last mile of the trip is a gravel road before the cave parking area. It's kind of a little sketch showing just the relationships where things are. The entrance of the cave is 100 yards from the parking lot. It's no great hike. It's a highly visited cave, nice and easy. So responding, the local volunteer cave cliff search team with 16 personnel is headed that way at different response times, because these are volunteers and they're coming from work or coming from home. So they don't all get there at once. The local paid fire rescue department has 4 people that are trained in cave rescue, and they're coming. So that gives us 20 people to work with. The state forest chief ranger is also coming. The rescue is on their property. So he's coming to represent that land management agency. And because we have a 911 call with a kid with a broken leg, the ambulance, the 911 ambulance provider is sending an ambulance. So I'm getting a little worried, though, as I responded to the scene. It's raining. And it's raining hard. It's been a wet spring. And on the access road, we passed the Resurgence Spring, and it normally looks like this in the spring. But today it looks like this. We may have a problem. So we meet the reporting party. It's 2 scouts that are 13 and 12 years old. In the cave is the patient, the 9-year-old Boy Scout with a broken leg, one scout leader adult, and 4 other scouts. So we've got 6 people still in the cave. Okay, so we basically do those early things we always do. We assign those early response task forces. We establish entrance control, get an initial response task force together, and a communications task force together. So we protect the entrance. We send somebody to locate the kid, find out what's going on, and take care of him until the rest of the cavalry gets there, and somebody to put communications in so we know what's going on. Our organization, our communications chart, per Andy, looks like this. We share incident command between fire rescue and the state forest. We get a scribe early, because if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. Also, just kind of to keep an eye on everything. Just in the military, I guess you'd call him a Batman, is that helper person. We get our entrance control, our initial response task force, and our communications task force. Blowing cave, it's right simple. We go in the entrance here that's 100 yards. Ceiling heights, it's walking up to this hands and knees crawl. And then it's big walking passage again to where our patient is. So it's not a real problem. You can see the scale in the bottom left. It's probably about 2,000 feet of just mostly walking passage to get to our patient. The word comes down. The initial response task force reports back to command. The hands and knees crawl is sumped shut. No access is possible by this route. Uh-oh, that easy rescue just went south. The weather predicts continued moderate heavy rain, so the sump is not going to open anytime soon. Well, what now? Well, is there an alternate route to the patient? Those of you who are paying attention to the cave map may have noticed one, but yeah, there's going to be one. There's a separate, but it's not going to be easy. If you'll notice, our original route was just Bing, but now we have a 200-foot wet climb up a fixed rope. Somebody did the bolt climb. Then a canyon passage that's kind of a tricky traverse, a 40-foot pit, then some more passage to a 60-foot pit, and then a big breakdown slope to the back door to our patient. So it's going to be problematic. Lots of problems to deal with. We've got a complex technical rescue now, where originally we thought we had a simple go in, get them out, no big deal. But now it's a complex technical rescue. How much additional help is needed? That's a good question. If you're in management, how much help are we going to need? And how do you figure this out? Well, how many? What level of training and experience are we going to need? When are we going to need them? Do they need to all come right now, or can some of them come in the morning? You never know. We've got to figure those things out. How are we going to get them? Do you put an ad in the newspaper or what? How are we going to get these people? Are we going to need additional above ground support staff? Well, I think so. Because we're going to need the incident command bus, because I don't know about you, but I don't like standing around in the rain all night during a cave rescue. I want a place to sit in the dry. We're going to need a public information officer, because this thing's going to go long enough. Things are going to get out to the news media. We're going to need that person. Food, water. These cavers are hungry people. Rain shelters. They don't like to stand in the rain either. Portable toilet. We're going to have a crowd at that trailhead that does not have a toilet. Site security, we got a 1-lane dirt road that leads to our scene. It would jam up with cars real quick. We're going to have to maintain that. We're going to need some kind of security and to manage that flow into there. So first call is to other nearby regional cave rescue teams for mutual aid response. You've pre-planned these. You make one phone call and get a bunch of people. We're lucky in our part of the world, we can make a few phone calls and get a lot of people instead of having to call individual resources. Second call is to the NCRC regional coordinator to come, because he's not far away, and assist with resource ordering. In other words, that's part of his job. And the mission of the NCRC is to provide that resource information and to train those people. Third is a call for local support equipment and personnel. Our local CERT team can bring the rehab bus with food. I mean, they can do hot pizza and soup and popcorn on the scene. So those little resources that are available locally can really be helpful. Our organizational chart just got really complex. You remember that other one with just a few little boxes? Our flow of information now has a ton of boxes. So let's look at it piece by piece. The command staff. Well, again, we have that shared command that's called unified command between the fire rescue and state forest. They are both legally charged with doing rescue on that property. So we share at that level. And they come up with the objectives for the operation together as a partnership. Family liaison, we've got the 2 scouts that came out we're going to have to deal with. We've got the relatives of those 2 scouts and the other 5 scouts and the scout leader. And that family liaison person is the point of contact between those families and the incident command operation. Our public information officer should be a trained professional public information officer. A lot of agencies have these, and it's handy if they've worked with cave rescue folks to know what we're doing and understand the complexities of things. But if not, they still can help you a lot. And then the standard plans, logistics, and operation. And we'll go through those. Plan section, we have our scribe that we had originally. We have somebody doing check-in. As all these people arrive, we need to know what resources are here, where they're from, what skills they have, and where they are right now. Situation status unit, in other words, what is going on in the rescue, what's the status of all our teams, all of our strike teams, all of our task forces, and just in general, what's going on. The resource ordering unit would be that NCRC rep and the other folks helping them order resources, because we're going to have to reach out beyond our mutual aid teams to individual resources. And that takes a lot of phone calls to get all that to happen. The logistics, this is the tools, the stuff to do with. Our equipment unit, that's the cave rescue gear. May come off of several different teams' rescue trucks or equipment caches. It's the litters, it's the ropes, it's the pulleys, all of that stuff. That's the equipment. And the equipment unit is the people that dole that stuff out or know where it is. The facilities unit are the people that basically set up and operate that base operation. The command bus, those rain tents, whatever else is there. The porta-johns even, they're responsible for taking care of those. The communications unit is for above ground communications only. In other words, from the staging area there at the trailhead to the cave entrance, from there, from the trailhead back to the end of the gravel road to the security folks. The communications really with radios around the command post to various staff people. The food unit, that's that food and water and stuff. Keep everybody going. And the security unit, maybe your game wardens, your forest rangers, or park rangers that will manage that flow of people. In other words, you've got to kind of prevent your bona fides to get in. That's logistics. The operations section is the one that's gotten large. The way we like to do this when it's going to get big is we have an above ground branch and a below ground branch, because it's basically two different worlds. And this also manages the span of control for these various peoples and jobs and tasks. So the above ground branch catches entrance control, staging, the transportation unit, landing zone. Hey, we may have to fly this kid out in a life force helicopter, or a dignitary may show up in a helicopter, who knows, or family member may arrive by helicopter, who knows. So, and then we have our original, ambulance that we got to take care of. And then thing that tends to get forgotten a lot is the evac team for the surface. In other words, when the patient gets to the cave entrance, we got to get them to the ambulance or to the helicopter. In other words, get them off the mountain, get them trail. So you got to have an evac team on the surface, and that's part of the above ground branch. Well, now on the below ground branch, we have the initial response task force, and that's pretty much go to the patient, find out what's going on, and manage that. Communications task force. This is setting communications in the cave. This is also not just for communicating, but on personnel accountability. We should know where everybody is, or at least where they're between, in other words, by team, whatever. In other words, we keep up with everybody. So if somebody goes missing, we know pretty much where they are. The medical team eventually takes care of the patient, supervises the packaging and patient care all the way till they turn them over to a higher medical operation. Transportation task force. This is the folks that when the rigging crew at one of the pits realizes they need another 300-foot piece of rope, somebody's got to take it to them quickly. And that's this transportation task force's job, moving stuff around inside the cave. Then the rigging task forces, this is going to get complex. We've got to rig the wet dome, the canyon, the 40-foot pit, the 60-foot pit, and the breakdown slope. So that's 5 places we've got to rig technical rope systems. And then in between those and around those, we're going to need people to move the patient. So we're going to need probably 4 or better evacuation task forces. Now, remember, we have a patient and then 5 other people. So each one of these rigging task forces is going to have to operate their hull system 6 times. And that's going to get real old, which also means that they can't cut loose and help move the patient. They're still going to be tasked with moving people. Rescuers get themselves up, but those other Boy Scouts and the scout leader, we're going to have to pull them up these things. So that, you see how it kind of got real complex. Okay, anybody have a guess how many people it's going to take to fill out this organization, this communications chart?
Go ahead and type it in the chat if you have a suggestion, anybody.
60.
First guess, hold up, we're just going to do it through the chat real quick. So first guess is 300. Anyone else have any guesses?
Well, I heard a 60 and then a 300 on chat.
60 to 70.
So that's a pretty good spread. And how are we going to figure that out? Well, that's one of those questions we're going to have to do, but we'll get there. But yeah, at this point, without doing some other stuff, it's pretty much a guess, but it's going to take a lot of people. So we'll see here in a minute. How long is it going to take?
Once again, please
any ideas on that?
Go ahead and type that in the chat. while folks are thinking about how long it's going to take, someone did bring up also that 100 and 200 people, but over time, reassessing as you go. Oh, here we go. Some time estimates: 48 to 60 hours, 24 hours, 36 hours. Nothing below 24 hours yet.
Yeah, okay. Well, there's no optimist in the crowd. Okay. But okay. Our public information officer reports that on social media, the Blowing Cave Facebook page has reported the accident already. And there's been 194 comments so far. Several of the in-cave folks have been identified. And in those comments, they asked cavers to come to the site to assist with the rescue. Ouch. That's why you have a PIO, public information officer. So far, 3 TV stations have called and 1 local newspaper has called. So it's going to be a fun time. So now we're going to do something. Mutual aid cave rescue teams begin to arrive to assist with the operation. The wet dome is being ascended at this time. And the NCRC regional coordinator arrives to assist with resource ordering. So we got to build a plan for this rescue. What would be helpful is if we already had a notebook on a shelf with a pre-plan for this exact problem, but because in the past, all of these rescues have been the easy walk in, get them out, we never planned for this eventuality. So we don't have a pre-existing plan. So we got to come up with one. First is, what are our operational periods going to be? Is 24 hours for the underground branch, or we got all those pits. If we send them in there, we can't pretty well do a shift change. Whoever's at the tip of the spear is going to stay there. We could do 12 hours above ground, but I think we're going to have to go with at least 24 hours for the underground folks. This is where being skilled in sleeping underground is a very useful skill. I think we need to add that to the NCRC curriculum, how to take a nap. I'm good at it. We come up with some objectives. These are not goals or wishes, but they're doable, definable with a time frame, such as have the 60-foot pit rigged for a haul belay by 3:30 a.m. That's an objective, but get the kid out of the cave. That's a goal or a wish, as I like to call them. Okay. So we do this. We set our objectives, then we come up with a list of tasks to accomplish those tasks. In other words, just sit down with a piece of paper or a whiteboard and list all of those tasks. Then we prioritize the tasks by when they need to be completed. In other words, like here, we got to rig the 60-foot pit before we get the 40-foot pit ready, because if the 40-foot pit's ready and the 60 isn't, we're just sitting there. And then resources are assigned to these tasks as they become available. And then also, one of the things we like to do is keep a pool of unassigned resources so that you can deal with unexpected needs. In other words, somebody calls for more help or needs something that's actually all the way back at base, we've got some people to take care of it without having to call somebody back out of the cave and all the way back to the base and then all the way back into the cave to move things or to staff a haul system or move a patient. We have basically a bench, like in football. You've got people to stand by to go in, the kicking team, as it were. Visualizing the big picture. This is a part of communication, is kind of visualizing the large situation, so we want to establish a situation status unit early, or it's commonly referred to as SITSTAT. And one of the ways to do that is to display a schematic sketch map to show obstacles within the cave, names of features, where our communication sites are. And we can also use it as a timeline of patient movement. This is not the survey map with all the intricate details. This is basically so that we can keep visualize the problems and the proximity of things in the cave. It's a great way of communicating to everybody what's going on and where things are at this moment. This is an actual sit-stat map, the sketch map. Actually, this was from an actual Ellison's rescue. And if you'll notice on here, like we use color, the red is patient movement. The accident occurred at 1600, that's 4 p.m. for you civilians, is he exited the cave at 12:30 the next day. And actually also, if you'll notice, he was at the entrance at 12:30. He was at the helicopter at 1:20. In other words, it took 50 minutes from the entrance to the helicopter. So it lets you also there's field phone locations and various other, names of places. It was a fun day. But that's a way to visualize and to brief everybody what's going on. Well, another way to visualize the big picture is a chart to show task and the personnel assigned to that task. There's many different ways to do this. Whiteboards are easy. The Forest Service uses a method called T-cards, but whiteboards are simple. And this is what it looks like. It was late in the operation as folks were checking out. You can see there were a lot of different evac teams and other things going on, and lots of things happening, and you can keep up with where everybody is assigned on this thing. It's a useful tool. Well, our rescue at Blowing Cave was a success. The patient exited the cave at 9:27 p.m. the next day. That's 26 hours after the 911 call. So 26, 24, somewhere in that neighborhood for that kind of level. And then there were 126 rescuers on the scene. So your guesses of 300 were probably a little, there might be that many people because they're all standing around out at the entrance and with the TV crews, but actual rescuers was 126. So don't forget, when the patient exits the cave, you still have to move them to the ambulance and the helicopter. Sometimes that's easy, like here, it's just one crew carries them down the 100 yards trail and boom, we're in the ambulance. With just a broke leg, it probably won't fly them in a helicopter unless they're just crazy and want the money. You may have to provide staffing for a helicopter landing zone with all this around and in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes you're going to have to staff that helicopter landing zone, at least to be able to communicate with a helicopter where you would like them to land. So it helps to pre-plan those places. The media will love you if you give them that patient coming out of the woods shot and then interview with somebody that's muddy. You can use your PIO to arrange this, and then at this point, you can get your message across on the shot and on the talking head that they're going to show. So this is your opportunity to send your message with the media, and they will love you for this. And they don't forget those sort of things. Remember that the incident can last many hours after the patient exits the cave. That Ellison's rescue, it was 6.5 hours after the patient exited the cave before all the rescuers were out of the cave. Another 6.5 hours, and there's been longer than that. Fatigue can be a killer, especially in long duration events. It's basically you're operating drunk. Your body just can only stand so much. That's why it's important to know how to rest and get those power naps in. Is one way to deal with this killer is through some mitigation techniques of fatigue. As you get the rescue over, there's a couple of ways. One is a mandatory screening before release, as you provide a warm, dark, quiet place and say, go in there, lay down for 10 minutes, and then you can get up and drive home. Is if they're fatigued, they'll be asleep in 10 minutes. Wake them up in 2 hours, they're good to go. It's a good, safe way to make sure everybody's ready to go, because if they are truly fatigued, like I said, in 10 minutes, they'll be sawing logs. Provide drivers to take them home. Everybody wants to go home. They're not capable of safe driving, but I've got time and resources. I can call a carpool to provide me drivers to put the cave rescuer in the passenger side of his car, put a driver behind the wheel, drive them home, and then the driver stands in the yard and waits on the van to come pick him up, and our fatigued cave rescuer goes in and sleeps in his own bed. He's safely home. At the very least, make personnel promise to pull over and rest if they get the knobs. And that's not just say, yeah, I'll do that. I make them promise, is you say it. I will pull over and rest if I get the nods. And because nods are micro sleep, you are falling asleep. You're just waking yourself up. If you ever noticed all those little white crosses on the side of the interstate highway, it's folks getting the nods and not waking up. If you've ever been there, and we probably all have, as you're seconds away from death when this happens. So, and it's very likely to happen in a long-term cave rescue or search or any long-term emergency. So do something to mitigate fatigue. You got to save all the paperwork. Full written report will need to be developed soon, but not right now, folks. You couldn't write a complete sentence if your life depended on it, probably. Take photos of the whiteboards often. It's a mistake I've made before. Somebody will brush up against them, or it'll start to rain and you kind of lose things. Be sure to thank everybody for coming. It means a lot. Some fatigued, blitzed out, bleary-eyed caver comes out of the woods after being in the cave for 20 hours, and you thank them for being there and give them a cup of hot soup or something like that, and they'll remember you forever. Remember, the cave and the surface area must be left better than we found it, especially if we're on private land somewhere and, park 47 cars in a farmer's front yard. We need to make it right. It may be coming back and fixing it, but we got to make it right. And everything must be gotten out of the cave, and we leave it better than we found it. Any medical equipment that went with the patient must be retrieved quickly. That exposure bag, that beanbag splint that are worth, lots of money, that fancy medical gear your team might have that went away in the helicopter with the patient, you better go get it, or have somebody meet somebody at the helicopter or at the hospital to get it, because it'll disappear if you don't. And that can be a problem if that helicopter just flew 100 miles. Call somebody in the city it went to and track that equipment down, because it'll get lost in the cracks if you don't. Or we've had a piece of expensive gear cut off with a pair of scissors. Just trashed it. So, oh well, cost of doing business, but go get your equipment quick. Critique, how do we do it better next time? It's a step after everything's over. Critique on the scene while everybody's standing around fatigued out of their minds and wants to go home and go to bed is not going to happen. Nobody will answer a question or ask a question. It's better to do it after the fact, in a short time, invite everybody, and it's best to have a skilled moderator. This is not who screwed up or, boy, that was a mess, but it's what all went on. I find the critique to be useful because it gives everybody a picture of what went on everywhere else. It's right useful to see just, what happened at that 40-foot pit or at the breakdown slope, because, only the team that was there knows exactly what happened there. So it's best to have a skilled moderator so the thing doesn't last all night. So do that after the fact. What is your risk assessment for a cave rescue to go big? Well, there's 5 caves in the U.S. over 100 miles long, and there's 38 over 20 miles long. The flooding risk trapping cavers. Remember Thailand? Everybody does, because it was all over the news for a long time. Anybody remember from 1979, Anderson Spring in Georgia had college students trapped in a cave. This was before satellite trucks and all that, but we made the national news for 2 days. Waited on the water to go down. Is tight access, crawls, crevices. Everybody remember Floyd Collins? Hey, that happened in 1925. Stuck in a cave, little bitty cave. Sand Cave, Kentucky. Nutty Putty Cave, Utah. Not very long, but very tight. Subject died there. Crooked River Swamp Cave had a fatality way back yonder. I think the whole cave's like 100 feet long. And so it can happen pretty much anything. Very deep caves. There's a lot of folks going into some very, very deep places these days around the world. There was a rescue in Spain that took 12 days. Emily's spring break in New Mexico in 1991 was 5 days. They can get very long. That was all over the news. It took a lot of people, a lot of work in a very fragile cave system. Imagine Camp 1, Camp 2, Camp 3, Camp 4, Camp 5 to get to the patient. Just imagine just a rescuer going from the entrance to the patient could take, days, just to get there. That was a 12-day rescue to get one guy out of a 1,000-meter deep cave. There are 3,000-meter deep caves out there in the world now. It getting scary. So now in the risk of being, we know we have risk of an incident happening, but where are you in the risk of being called to deal with one of these things? Are you with that agency having jurisdiction? Is it your fire department, your sheriff's office, your land management agency? Are you likely to be the incident commander, or at least, like operations chief? Or are you part of a mutual aid agency? Are you an officer or team leader of a specialized cave rescue team? Are you a member of one of those teams? Or are you a trained cave rescue, one of those single resources? Are you an experienced caver? Often we reach out to just experienced cavers because they know the cave better than anybody. Maybe they've mapped it or they've explored it. They know it. I've been there maybe once and they've been there 20 times and they made the map. Or are you a spelunker? Sometimes a spelunker can be your best friend because he knows what the spelunkers call various things and he can take you to that place. So you never know what a resource will be. So the language of emergency response is the National Incident Management System, commonly called ICS. It's basically the language of emergency response. If you don't speak the language, you fail to communicate effectively. It's like everybody's speaking Russian and you don't know a word of it. And that's hard to communicate if you don't understand the language. The handy thing is in North America or in the United States, everybody speaks the same language of emergency response, this ICS stuff. So get the proper level of ICS training for your involvement status. This is the question that came up earlier. And most of these basic classes are available online, and just training.fema.gov It's trainingfema.gov, and look for them. They're free. Take 30 minutes or an hour or so. When you finish, there's a little online test, and then you can print out a certificate suitable for framing on your own printer. So if you're a management team leader, the minimum required is a classroom training of ICS 300 and 400. This is 5 days of language training, basically. It is intense and death by PowerPoint. If you're a team member, trained rescuer, go online, get the ICS 100 and 200 classes. Okay, Andy, pay attention here. It's the 100, 200. The 700 thing you mentioned is about the national plan, and no basic team member needs to know what the national plan is. It's like for Hurricane Katrina or earthquake or global pandemic or whatever. The Jedi Knights of Incident Management are from the U.S. Forest Service National Park Incident Management Team. Learn from them. No, try not. Do or do not. There is no try. These folks are Master Yoda. Imagine managing an incident with 10,000 people involved for a month, with, say, an Air Force of 150 fixed wing aircraft and, say, 125, helicopters. And it entails 3 different states and a wildfire. These incident management teams from the Forest Service, Park Service handle about a dozen of these things a year. They get good at it. We have no idea the complexity of these things. You can imagine they spend like $1 million a day at minimum on these things. So, I mean, it's a massive organization. Closest thing to it is the military fighting a war somewhere, that kind of logistics and organizational and personnel chain. But so my best advice for dealing in the incident command system is get a comfortable chair. A couple of reasons for this. One, it's going to be a long night. Second is if you're in a chair, you can think, and also people know where to find you. You're not wandering around, you're accessible. In other words, so as a manager, get a comfortable chair. And some hints: get a scribe early, somebody to help you. Maybe just run, get a cup of coffee, or write this down, or find somebody's phone number for me. Just deal with it. Answer the radio, I'm busy. Another thing, what have we forgotten and what do we need to do next? Repeat this out loud often. I like to do it at least every 15 minutes. And I mean, I'll set my watch to go beep, and we'll actually stop and say this out loud and bounce it off the command staff. What have we forgotten and what do we need to do next? It keeps you from messing up. Whiteboard, big ones, are your friend. I like 4x6 or 4x8 feet whiteboards, and lots of colored pens and some easels to stand them up on. Whiteboards are your friend. Put your strongest, best people on the communications task force. This gets back to what Andy was saying, is information is key. The goal I would like to see in a communications task force is to, when the medic first assesses the patient with the initial response task force, he gets through assessing the patient and turns around and says, "Where is communications?" You put a phone in his hand. If you do that, you're in business. And I've actually done that before. So put your strongest, best people on the comms task force. You can always switch them off later, but to get that phone to the tip of the sword, you need good people and fast people. And it will save you so much time and friction to get that done. Always, these are alwayses. The evac team at the patient will always scream for more help. Always, always, always. They never have enough help. Whoever's moving the patient will call for help. Resources that are past pits and obstacles are always out of the picture once the patient moves past. They'll be unable to move quickly enough to catch back up. So sometimes you just have to minimize the number of people past a certain obstacle because you don't have enough people to pull off the rest of the rescue once they're gone. And they're pretty much gone once the patient moves through. The media will always interview someone. Make sure it's your person and that person is briefed on what the message should be. Cave rescue always takes longer than expected. It's always true. And anybody that tells you we'll be ready in 10 minutes, it will always take longer than that. Never think you have enough trained help. So just remember, never forget the patient will be hypothermic when you get there. Yeah, there's exceptions. There's caves in North America that are hotter than people. But for the most part, they're going to be a popsicle when you get there. Now think of our kid, our 9-year-old in Blowing Cave. Complaint, call came in, he had a broken tib fib. By the time we get to him, what's going to kill him? It's not going to be the broken leg. It's going to be hypothermia. So go with the idea of treating what's going to kill him. We deal with a broke leg, but if he's dead from hypothermia. So go with that in mind. Never assume the reporting party can actually tell you where the patient is. Patient's just above the waterfall. Which waterfall? Well, the big waterfall. Well, there's 7 waterfalls in different parts of the cave. Which is the big one? Yeah. Well, how'd you get there? Well, we went through the volcano room. Well, that's the long way to get there. So never assume. Never forget that fatigue can kill people, especially after the rescue is over. That's the most dangerous time, actually. There's some good books on this. Bob Costner out of Virginia has written an excellent book on fatigue. Read it. It'll scare you to death. Never quit training. Train like you fight, fight like you train. The goals in cave rescue. Get the patient out of the cave as quickly and safely as possible in the same condition you found them, or better. Do no harm. In other words, don't drop them. Don't break them. Don't freeze them to death. Don't drown them. Get them out of the cave as safely and quickly as possible. When the patient begins movement toward the entrance, you shouldn't delay other than periodic stops for patient assessment care. If you're waiting at the bottom of a pit for the rigging crew to get done, something's wrong. In other words, there should be no delay once you pick that patient up. The basic truth here is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. In other words, patient movement should be slow and smooth, and that will get you out the fastest way possible. Hurrying up will actually take longer. Things will mess up. Everything is hard until you figure out how to do it. If you've ever had to rig a difficult pit, once you figure it out, it's easy. So, information is the key to it all. Gather and share information. This goes back to what Andy was talking about earlier. Information, communication is the key to it all. That's why I put best people on the communications task force. I need information, and I need good information, and I need it now. So that's the key to everything, and information going up and going down the chain. So, and as a manager, your job is to think and direct, not to do. So in summary, the NCRC mission is basically training those cave resources and keeping track of them. And for the last 40-something years, they've been doing a good job of that. When I first started in all this, there just wasn't anybody to call. And now there's lots of people. So it's quite pleasing to see the results of our work over the years. Uh, Failure to plan is planning to fail. So come up with a plan and don't plan by yourself. And the handiest thing is to plan ahead of time. So don't plan to fail. Concentrate on factors that are important for success. As a cave rescue manager, whether to feed everybody peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or bologna sandwiches is something you should not worry about. That's somebody else's problem. You need to concentrate on the important stuff and factors that are important for success. So concentrate, get in that chair and think, not do. And this is me. How to get a hold of me so at this point, Sarah, is chat questions, comments, suggestions, critiques,
Yeah,
and
sure.
questions and I have a thick skin, so go for it, folks.
We did have a couple of chats come in, or a couple of questions come in the chat. And so while folks are thinking about other questions that they might have, I can get us started with those. First off, we just had a quick clarification for the example that you gave. The blowing cave example, was the 126 personnel all inclusive of all activity, including on the surface, or was that just underground?
That was all inclusive. Now, folks, the blowing cave incident is made up. So that's my opinion of how many people it would take. That's not a real cave rescue, but I can cite examples of real ones, and it's about 3/5 or 4/5 underground and 1/5 or 2/5 above ground.
We also had a question come in about different ways to use different techniques, particularly for rigging, but in general, how you might be able to reduce the size of teams. Is there a way that you can see where you actually could end up with fewer people underground and get the same work done, or do cave rescues really take just that many people?
It's because of the terrain is rigging. We tend to overcomplicate things and it takes too many people. Keep it simple. Georgia Hall was invented for a particular reason. In fact, I was on the trip where it was invented. It is basically, we put a rope over a carabiner and we pulled it. Not a lot of people, quick, didn't take any gear, it worked. Is it safe? Will it work? And it's going to take a lot of people, because to move a load up a drop, even using mechanical advantage, is going to take some muscle power. And then basically the cave terrain is going to require lots of people, and you burn through crews rather quickly. And with this example, with the number of vertical obstacles, you're going to leave people behind. I would say, when this patient exits the cave, there's still going to be 60 people underground. So it's going to be a tough night. Cave rescue tends to take a lot of people.
Do you remember the biggest incident that you've ever overseen?
The incident, if you go incident, is I dealt with a week-long flood in South Georgia. There were lots of different agencies, and we had, I think, 25 boats, about 100 ATVs. So it was, long-term large event. I've had some searches go for a week. Cave rescue is probably 26 hours with 106 people on the scene.
And was that the Ellison's rescue that you?
That was the Ellison's one. I've had a search where we had actually, I think it was 18 satellite trucks on the scene.
Wow.
Yeah, the media, they had nothing to do in early January. We had overseas media on a search. It wasn't a cave incident, but it was a massive operation. So I've seen large.
Well, we are just about at time. I think it's a perfectly acceptable now if anyone wants to unmute, and we can continue to chat, or if you have questions you want to ask Alan directly rather than typing. But just once again, thank you, Alan, for this excellent overview of how to manage big cave rescues. So thank you for that, Alan.
Thank you.
And like I said, feel free to unmute if anybody else has questions or wants to chat.
Alan, my name is Robert. I'm out of Austin, Texas. Really appreciated everything you shared with us. I had a quick question about ego. You talked a lot about people in the cave doing their best to support the mission. Ego has always been a factor in large groups or complex missions. I was curious if you had comments on that.
Yeah, been there, seen it. One of the ways to get around that is basically through the management is by assigning a certain task, and even a pre-plan is, okay, I need you to rig this pit and here's how I want you to do it. You know, here's the drawing, here's the gear, go do it. In other words, you give specific orders. In other words, don't get in there and do a traveling reed when a traveling reeve with a counterbalance and, a 72 to 1 haul system when a simple 3 to 1 over the edge will work, is often because, we'll be waiting for 10 hours while you finish, instead of being ready to haul the patient when he gets there. But yeah, it happens because a lot of cavers, but if you're a real cave rescuer, you do what your, assignment, and yeah, we'll discuss what works and what's safe, but there's feedback, but get the job done. We're there for the patient, that help you all right. Hey, Bill.
I've seen several times where rigging teams have put in perfectly adequate rigging and then decided to redo it, and the patient arrived and they weren't ready.
Yeah,
This
like I said, well, there's several things that always happen on a mock. Is communications gets farbled up and they re-rig everything 6 times. If they just get simple, it would work, but no, it's part of the problem, is because NCRC has to teach you all these whiz-bang ways, and then the trouble is they can't give you the experience of knowing when to use those things. And when's the last time you saw a Georgia haul on a mock rescue? We do it all the time in real rescues. So,
anyway, I got to run off for another meeting. See you all later.
All right. Good to see you again, Bill.
Good to see you, Alan.
We do have another question about how often you would recommend rotating people out. And of course, no, the questioner, Kevin, does say, it depends, but just your general reflections on that.
Well, I won't say it depends. Is pretty much in a cave rescue is because of the terrain, is point of the sword, first in, last out. Is there's really no way to do a shift change in the deep cave environment, or any kind of, other than maybe our original plan at Blowing Cave here where we walked in and walked out, but why bother there? It's too easy. But shift change is virtually impossible, because then you'd have to stop the rescue to move, 24 people out, and then take the time to move the 24 people in past all those obstacles. So the rescue would sit on standby for hours while this happened. So what you can do is, if you need to rest people, is kind of like in the wildland fire spike camps, is rest them in place and use, send enough people to have multiple crews where there's one resting all the time. And hopefully you stage them along the route. So when say a 6 or 8 person crew moves the patient to a certain location, they can stop and hand it off And that's why it takes so many people, because you just can't handle a litter in rough terrain for that long without getting fatigued, and then you'll drop a patient or hurt a rescuer. So it's pretty much, especially, if you're first in, you're going to be last out. Go prepared for that and learn how to, and carry gear, like in your cave pack, a couple of sit pads and an extra jacket is so you can curl up and go to sleep after you've rigged that pit, waiting on the patient to get there. You've rigged the pit, you've practiced the evolution, make sure everything works, and then curl up and go to sleep and keep somebody awake on the field phone.
So I'll follow up on that. I've been in a few mock rescues where I was on Hasty 1 and ended up in the cave for 16, 17 hours. So I realized that you can't get everybody who's on Hasty 1 out of the cave. So very specifically, I'm asking, if somebody's on evac 1 or evac 3, whatever, how often do you think, on average, just an estimate, people can haul a litter? I know when I was doing it, I did it for 9 hours straight, and I was real damn tired at the end. That seems like way too long. But like,
is probably, if the goal would be maybe an hour at the most, but sometimes I may violate the patient doesn't stop moving. Is if you've got to stop and take a break, that's just the way it's going to be, because you can't, remember, we don't want to do any harm. If we are totally exhausted, it's like doing CPR. You do it till you can't do it anymore. It's with moving a patient is we'll try to get some help there, but sometimes it's just logistically and personnel wise a little hard to do. So either suck it up and keep moving or rotate your own team, that's why I like to staff litter teams with more than the number of people that are going to be actually hands on the litter. That way, even as they're moving, they're swapping hands. In other words, so somebody doesn't have a hand on the litter all the time. You get little breaks, every couple of minutes.
All right, folks, well, it's getting kind of late on the East Coast, so let's give Alan another thank you. And please come back and join us in a couple of weeks for our next set of presentations. Thanks again for joining us tonight. And thanks to both of our speakers.